Dr. Paul, welcome back to Freedom Watch. It's always a pleasure. What can the government do? The public is in acute distress. The president has been virtually silent. The Congress, except for you, seems like it's still on vacation. What can we do?
Well, we should have done a lot less, a lot sooner. It would have been nice that they could have anticipated what it would be like if they created the TSA, where there were about 3 of us objected to that. But now, what do? Well, my suggestion is the first thing we should do is make sure there's no immunity for the people in the government doing things that are illegal for everybody else. And that's what my bill would do. That would be a step. But that's a long way off. How am I going to get the House to pass it, the Senate to pass it, and the president won't sign it? So that leaves it to the people. The people have to express themselves. And I'd have to say they're doing a pretty good job. And I would say not only the cables, but the Main Street media, give them credit. They're putting stuff out there, and they're showing the abuse. So it is waking up the American people. Sadly, it's slow. But I think we're making progress. I really think that people are getting annoyed. But I think a little bit of civil disobedience won't hurt. I mean, stand up to him and say, I've had this. He says, you can't make me do this, and see what happens. So I think opting out isn't the worst idea in the world.
Here's the problem as I see it. You know, a person can't fondle their neighbor when their neighbor comes onto their property. We don't have the right or the power to give that power to the government. How can the government do something that we can't do, that we never empowered the government to do it? As I'm discussing this with you, we're showing a film of a 6-year-old boy being stripped to his waist and touched by federal agents against the parent's will.
You know, and looking at this, and that's what motivated me the other day, was if this doesn't wake us up, what chance do we have to get them to bring our troops home and look at the Patriot Act and look at our foreign policy and do all the other things and look at the Fed? Those are big issues, too. But this one is in our face. If they can put up with it and say, oh, well, sacrificing a little bit of our freedom is necessary because we want to be safe. And you know the absurdity of that. If we want to be perfectly safe, we're going to have government cameras not only in our cars measuring everything we do and say, but in our houses, too. You know, we can prevent crimes in our houses. You know, every once in a while, kids get beaten and wives get beaten. So if we had a camera in the houses, we would prevent a lot of crime. So this goal of having perfect safety and that the government's responsible for it is a notion that has been growing too long. I hope we can use this episode with the TSA to show that that's not a responsibility of government. The responsibility of government is to protect our liberty.
Have you detected the view that you've just expressed amongst your fellow members of Congress? Because I wasn't kidding. We had John Mica on last week, a Republican who wrote the TSA Act 6 or 7 years ago, who said, we never intended this and we have to take this power back. We've heard you. The president said, oh, I talked to Janet Napolitano, but she tells me this is the only thing we can do. Congressman, Congress would never have written this law because they could never confront their constituents. This is a rule written by nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Question, are other members of Congress as animated about this as you are?
Well, I think a few are, but that it remains to be seen. But I just don't think that the enthusiasm is there. The people who created the TSA, well, we didn't intend it to do this. And like you say, it was done by regulators. But that's what happens all the time. Right. Do you think the Congress writes all the regulations of the IRS? Do they write them for the fish and wildlife and wetlands? But that's a derelict duty by the Congress. And, you know, the executive branch is not to write laws. They shall write no laws. It's only the Congress. Right. So it's that whole principle that's allowed this total out-of-control growth of the executive branch and judicial branch.
Does the federal government have any business, any authority, or any particular specialty in protecting private property?
Not the federal government. As a matter of fact, I don't think of government as protecting private property. I think the Second Amendment protects your private property. And the government should protect your amendment, your rights, and if somebody does invade your property, they can get involved. But you can't depend on the government. You know, Brinks does a pretty good job at protecting our money, but they own the trucks and they have their guards and it's a secure truck. I don't know why that principle can't be applied to our airlines. They have a precious cargo. I've always argued, even from 9/11 on, that, you know, this country thinks more of their money. They allow the private sector to do the good job protecting the money, but they won't let the private sector protect a precious cargo, the people. And yet, you know, it was the government's failure before 9/11. Our federal government was in charge of security. We were spending $40 billion. It totally failed. So we doubled its budget and took away more freedoms from the American people. Then they wonder why it's not working very well. I mean, we need to wake up and wake up quickly. But what I'm afraid of, if they don't do it in a systematic, orderly fashion, people are going to wake up being pretty darn angry as our economy deteriorates. I think we could be in for big trouble. So that's why we need to wake up a lot more people. And hopefully this Tea Party movement has done part of this. So we'll see what happens next year, see if we come to our senses.
I think you have the phrase of the week this Thanksgiving week, Congressman Paul. Enough is enough. Thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.